Now, a conference, especially when you organize it yourself, has one beautiful side feature. As the organizer, you can really ask the questions you want to ask. And as an M&A banker, having done the BigPoint transaction and looking into all these KPIs and metrics in terms of how easy it is to launch games and how difficult it is to keep the players, we ask ourselves about this key question: how can game publishers keep their players excited? And we looked a lot at Asian publishers where they did over and over and over kind of new rollouts. And I'm very happy to have a very prominent panel here. And the kind of key question is how you guys keep your players. And before we go into those detailed data questions, I would like everyone to introduce himself. Maybe Khaled, you can start.
Yeah. So, hi, I'm Khaled Helioui. I'm the CEO of BigPoint. BigPoint is one of the first gaming companies that introduced the free-to-play model in Europe. It was founded by Heiko Hubert like 11 years ago. BigPoint is different in a number of ways, in the sense that our games are mostly browser-based. You can play the games directly on the browser without installing a client. And we also cover a number of genres. So we're not only doing casual games and social games, the way people refer to them, but also mid-core games and now hardcore games. So we're catering to a pretty big audience. Our games are in 150 countries. We provide 180 payment systems to allow our users to pay in their local currency, which is actually quite relevant to optimize the conversion rate. And we're just launching in Asia this year. It's been a pretty big year for us.
Hi, my name is Tung. I'm the CEO of ProSiebenSat.1 Games, the games subsidiary of the television group ProSiebenSat.1 Media. I joined ProSiebenSat.1 December of last year. And ProSiebenSat.1 is focusing on client-server-based games, so it's not mainly, as you guys do, browser-based games. So we have a client that needs to download. It's a very rich game content, and within these client-server-based genres, we are focusing core games, core mid-core games. So it's mainly male audience, and the territories that we focus on are Europe. And the goal is to become one of the leading publishers in Europe, because we are more like a new kid on the block than a BigPoint, who is an established player. But we think that the gaming space is pretty attractive, and still lots of room to grow, though it's challenging, but that's something what we'll discuss later. But it's definitely a place to be.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Vicenc Marti. I'm the CEO of Akamon. Akamon was founded in July 2011 with a very contrarian view on the social casino industry. As a matter of fact, the social casino industry, which is defined as the $3 billion industry by Morgan Stanley, is mostly US, UK, Australia, and New Zealand. And we said, listen, let's do something different. We focused on Southern Europe and Latin America. We manage a portfolio of 38 games on Portal, Facebook, and mobile, and so far so good.
Yeah, name is Miczaika. You may know me from NOAH presentations. CEO of Wooga, a Berlin-based developer of mobile and Facebook and social games, very casual games. Currently now in the shift to mobile, so 2/3 of our revenue is there, and that's definitely where we see the future.
Okay, so for me, gaming is the industry which is over and over disrupted. First of all, we had the console publishers. They got disrupted by online subscription businesses. The online subscription guys got disrupted by the free-to-play publishers, very strong coming out of Germany with BigPoint, Gameforge, Travian, InnoGames. And then the free-to-play guys got disrupted by social, also by Wooga, by the way. And social got disrupted by mobile. Now, some players, including BigPoint, from free-to-play managed to go into social, and also some social guys managed to go into mobile. But you have a long history of disruption. Now I'm asking you a very private question. We call ourselves the data or the no blah blah conference. Share with us some data on how long, on average, a player is playing your games. If you don't want to give it by the day, you can give us at least an indication, please. Maybe Jan, you start.
Well, average is kind of wrong in gaming. So there's a certain set of industry metrics which you have to hit in the beginning, the 1, 7, 28-day retention. People often talk about 40, 20, 10%, which I think is even a bit too low, but that's kind of... And then once someone is past the 28-day point, those that stick, you have to make sure they stick forever. And then the life cycle of a game, I mean, Monster World, one of our early successes is 3 years old, and it's maybe half of its peak. So it's very, very, very long-term game.
Okay.
Yes, the average is the wrong way to look at it. I agree with you. That being said, 10 months is our standard.
10 months.
10 months for social casino. But again, this is an average. It doesn't tell the story. I mean, people that have been playing, you know, our games are also games that have been played for generations. You know, I would mention Buraco in Brazil. We have the highest Buraco played on Facebook. It's a card game. People there play there for 2 years. So that's the way to look at it. I mean, people that surpass a certain period, especially in our world, if they're whales, you have to keep them as long as you can.
I totally agree, because if you just take the overall majority of games or gamers that you have in your games, it wouldn't be the right focus. So what we are focusing on is on the active players, but even more on the whales, on the spenders, and trying to keep them as long in the games as possible. And so we have games where players are there for 2 or 3 years, and those that are the ones we are focusing on. In average, I would say 8 months plus for the whales, and we are actively trying to extend this, because if you have one whale, you need to keep him, because losing that is really a hard scenario for us.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of truth in that. It's also, you cannot attain general truth for all kinds of games and also for different genres, like people behave differently. It's sure that past that first gap of like 1 day, 7 days, 14 days, if you keep the people, then they have different behavior. But if I look at Farmerama, our biggest casual game, the average time that people stay after they stay over 1 month or 2 months is actually 23 months. And it's a casual game. People think that for a casual game, people don't play over 1 month or 2 months or 3 months, but it depends how you manage your title. If you keep adding content, keep adding features, and building lifetime, you can keep people for as long as they have fun in the game. And for our mid-core games like Dark Orbit, the average time life for lack of a user is like 19, 20 months as well.
So it's more complicated than I thought.
Slightly.
Okay, let's move on then with the next questions. We make it a bit easier this time. I just want you to raise your hands. Do you generate more than 50% of your revenues through the mobile device? Do you generate more than 50% of your revenues from Facebook? Interesting. So let's talk about innovation. I remembered when I met Jan and Jan in Berlin a few years ago, I was amazed by how you have organized new game development. You basically created within Wonga little sub-companies, teams, who are responsible for their games to go out. So you, I guess, have accountability when things go wrong. Maybe you can share with us some of the secrets of your success.
Well, it's really about independence, responsibility, and trust. So what Marco was referring to is we believe in small teams, game teams, which are very agile, which are self-contained. So we'll have engineers, artists, game designers in the team working on a project, which continuously grow over time. In the beginning, it's just one guy with an artist, and then it grows. And that's also the way we scale the company, by just adding more game teams. And then every 5, 6, 7 game teams, there's one studio head who organizes kind of these, and they all report to Jens, our CEO, who's actually also our main product guy. And I think that's very important in a gaming company, that the CEO is also the kind of product visionary. He says of himself he's probably not the best game designer, but at least he keeps things organized.
So when you look at the operating systems, and we're going back to mobile, Klaus Hommels was saying yesterday morning, when I asked him what does he look at when he invests, he said management, but also how does the investment opportunity work in the world of Google, Apple? When you think about iTunes and Android, and the way those platforms work today, and I would also add Facebook for that, maybe, Khaled, you can share with us some of your thinking on how difficult it is to be found on those platforms and what you do to differentiate from other publishers?
Yeah, I think what mobile is facing right now is actually pretty similar to what you had at the beginning of online. You had like basically the gold rush, where people saw a number of companies do really well, and you had like, you see like the examples of like Clash of Clans or Heyday or like Gung Ho in Japan, where you had games that can do $2 million per day or $5 million per day, like Puzzle and Dragons. Obviously that attracted a lot of attention. But the whole point is actually not getting to the #1 position, and not only in free, but also in terms of the grossing, but it's actually staying there. And when you look at the number of companies, the number of games that actually stayed in the top 10 of the App Store, for instance, for over 7 months, you don't have that many games. So people think in terms of the mobile gaming industry to be very diversified and fragmented number of games, but the revenue concentration is actually extremely high, much higher than what you see in the online. And the thing is, in terms of like the interest or the attractiveness of the Apple Store or Google Play at the beginning was actually people saying, unlike the online space, it's a level playing field. Like you basically cannot like buy your way in and so on. But that was at the time where actually the industry was still relatively small. Where now you're competing with people that generate $3–5 million per day, where they had like production teams of like 10 to 15 people. And they actually spend a lot of that money in advertising, traditional advertising, but also like on Facebook and mobile ads. That makes it actually quite tricky for new players to come in and make a difference. It's still possible, but it's actually quite challenging.
So the industry has become very competitive. There are more titles chasing the same number of players, and therefore the marketing has increased. How much you guys spend on marketing? Is this your biggest cost item in the P&L structure, or is there research and development, the game development costs higher? So I don't know if you have the figures, but we do our yes and no game again. So the ones who spend more money on game development, please raise your hands.
But not by much.
Interestingly, the media company from Germany spends more money on marketing. I wonder why. Do you pay real price or transfer?
No. The thing is that we are a publisher, so we do not have game development. So we buy game licenses and publish and operate them. So that makes a difference.
And the price of your license is more than marketing or less than marketing?
It is less than marketing. Definitely.
It's less than marketing.
Yes.
So,
yes.
So marketing is really the game.
Yes.
Now let's talk about, I guess there are 3 different or main marketing spend areas. And as we lose gamers, and you know, your questions were very long when I asked how long they play. Maybe it was a combination of you don't want to tell us, and it's complicated. And I guess the reality is, as we can see in the Zynga case study, that this business, by the way, one of the evidences that money doesn't buy innovation, because clearly they were, for a while, one of the most valued companies in gaming, yet they managed not to find continuously good titles. As we know in the league tables, I think King.com passed them quite strongly. But if you look at your titles you're launching and the marketing you spend, the 3 channels, I believe, are Google search, social, and TV. And Wonga, you have a fantastic story around your growth. Can you comment a little bit on those 3 marketing channels and what they did to your business?
Yes, well, Google search is obviously very relevant, I assume, for the browser game companies. For us, the bulk of our spend is on mobile. So if I look at our marketing budget, it's probably 90% mobile right now.
Okay, that's very interesting, because there's this interesting company from Finland called Supercell, which did an amazing large multi-billion-dollar transaction with SoftBank, I believe. And when I met one of the angel investors, Klaus Kersting, who normally always comes to NOAH, I think he's too busy these days, but he was saying that their marketing budget on a day, I think, reached 800,000, while they generated 1.2 million revenues a day. And then I was asking myself, gosh, where can you spend 800,000 on a mobile user acquisition? Can you tell us who is receiving your marketing money on the mobile side?
I'd like to meet them one day. But I mean, generally, it's across the networks. And so you have companies like us who, on the one hand, sell advertising, but then we also buy advertising. So we're profiting from their spend. On the other hand, we're also competing with their spend on the acquisition front.
But do you go to players like Getjar, who promises to get users, or are you going to the mobile business is direct?
We have connections. I think when we do, so the thing is when we do a launch, we need hundreds of thousands of downloads per day, and then you're just buying everywhere and kind of indiscriminate. And then after, once the launch is kind of over, you go into the CPI, cost per install, lifetime value phase, and then you're much more selective. I mean, what we don't do is incentivize traffic, because it's not worth it for us. What we really like is video advertising, putting a lot more money into that. But other than that, it's...
And okay, everyone raises their hand who has done television advertising. That's 4 out of 4. And if you look at the 3 channels, which one you think is the one most rewarding to you?
It varies per type of game, but again, I'm not saying it's different every time, but the fact that we're doing casual, mid-core, and core games, if I go on the casual and the social side, TV works fantastic. So like, we worked a lot with ProSieben, and ProSieben had such an impact when we launched Farmerama that brought the game from actually doing a couple of €100,000 to actually like 3 million, 4 million, 5 million euro revenue. And you like basically the hockey stick level you can get because you're reaching a broad audience. Casual gamers are not gamers. They're like everyday people who want to get entertained and have fun. The more core you go, the more it's actually building a brand and building a community. And thus, basically, the TV and BD partnership are not as much relevant. It's actually finding that niche of players and building that community and having them stay for as long as you can. And the reality, the size of the market are still as relevant because 75% of the whole industry is still core and mid-core. So the revenue potential is much, much higher there. But then TV becomes less relevant because like, your conversion rate becomes lower for actually the kind of audience that you're reaching. So then search engine marketing is good, but also viral tools like Twitch TV, Machinima work extremely well. If you have the good content, one video on YouTube or on Twitch can generate much more user bases than actually a TV ad on mainstream TV at the end of the day.
So what makes a game successful if you look at the KPIs? When you launch, maybe back to Jan, when you launch a game, at what point, number of players, are you satisfied?
Well, since you were asking what makes it successful, what makes a game successful is always retention. If you don't have retention, anything else about monetization doesn't really matter. Our definition of a hit is tens of millions of dollars in lifetime value. So if and then that gets broken down a bit more internally, but I don't really want to go into that. But so for us, a hit is tens of millions of dollars in lifetime value.
And when you launch games, do you think that users which you acquire are coming from other games, competing games, or are you also sometimes reaching new gamers? You're in the kind of mobile gambling, kind of funny money business.
Look, I think one area of marketing is usually understated and wrongly so, which is look for likes. You know, at the end of the day, any research that you can do on your current database and CRM, and especially if you can approach to the dolphin turning into whale type of player, will turn your marketing much more effectively. So what we try to do is target people that already like our games and are still not there, and that's probably the most effective way to do that.
Okay, so we learned a few things already, and I have 2 more questions, but what we learned is that you keep players between a month and 10 months. Some players stick around for a long time. I remember Gameforge O-Game, where the community was very vibrant, and when we did the BigPoint deal, I was reading the forum, and they were like, oh my God, another server died, and call your friends, we need to play more. There's a very active community, and Klaus Testing told me that they even switched off the support for these users, and it's a cash business. But obviously, it's becoming tougher to keep the user. It's becoming probably more expensive to develop games as it's more competitive, and the marketing costs are rising. Do you see your job becoming more and more difficult?
I think predictions in gaming have so consistently been proven wrong that I don't want to say it. I mean, I think the environment is already very tough compared to 2 years ago, and I don't see it getting easier for any reason.
I mean, I agree, but we're very optimistic. At the end of the day, we're focusing on an area that is Southern Europe and Latin America, which are still showing tons of growth. Brazil is a wonderful story for us. You know, it surprised us on the positive side. And while everything that has been said is true, I think there's still opportunities as long as you continue innovating on the content and get even better and better on the optimization of analytics.
Totally agree with the two guys. It has become very competitive, challenging probably than ever right now, even also with the mobile platforms. But I think it's really still a very good place because it's actually one of the entertainment genres that really still grows compared to other platforms like, for example, TV. That's also the reason why ProSieben has invested or is going strongly into gaming. And if we take a look at companies like, for example, King, who were in a difficult situation 2 or 3 years ago, I think they really show us that if you work hard, if you do your job, if you excel in quality and execution, then you can make it with the combination of luck and working really hard on the content, make it really consistently good, work on the retention. That are the driving factors.
Yeah, I think it's not that it's become like much more difficult, it's become much more challenging. Just like I think the market got more educated. Like basically casual players and social players are not ready to accept everything that they used to do before. And just like have the bar that has been raised, and I think that it's just like the level of quality of the content has to get that much higher. When you said like takes more money, it's more expensive to build games, I would say that it takes more talent and expertise to build games. Not everybody can come up with a game in like 2 or 3 months and get it out there and expect people to come in, play and pay. And I think it has become more challenging, but I think it's for the better for the industry. And as Tung said, it's a $70 billion industry that people expect to reach $90 billion in 2016. It's much easier than any other part of the entertainment industry. And you have segments of the market like Asia that actually a number of our players, like I heard that you said you're entering Korea, 45% of that market is in Asia. A number of the European players didn't even target it.
So Asia is actually my next question. And as you know, we are bankers and conference organizers by hobby. I think 3 of you guys have financial backers, and then we have 1 strategic play. If we think about exits, and I'm not going to ask who is IPOing, or we're not asking any direct questions like that, that would be impolite. But of course, I'm interested to know if I should spend more time in Asia, where you have like the largest gaming businesses of the world. I think the Nexon founder has a family office here, and we have a lot of people looking at Europe. However, we have not seen yet the big Asian acquisition of a European company. Now, when you look at your way down the road, who of you, please hands up, sees a remote chance that an Asian company could approach you and potentially acquire your business?
Of course. Yeah. Of course.
Okay. So I would say this is more than optimism. I'm sure that this is some kind of founded thing. So the Asian guys are getting more interested in Europe. That's interesting. So
it's also because, I mean, the Asian players are hugely successful in their home territories. Look at Changyu, look at NHN, look at Gangho, for example. They have a really big war chest to spend, and that's also the reason why they did the deal with Supercell. And I think there's a high probability that we see more of the deals coming because the home market has also some limits for them. So they have to go beyond the borders. And I think growing global, the first step is probably the US, but also the European territories are very interesting for them. So for me, it's just a question of time when they come into our markets and do some bold acquisition here as well.
But interestingly, in the game of social and mobile, not so many Asian games made it successful in Europe. If I remember, in the free-to-play and client play, we had Mitten 2, which was a licensed game by Gameforge, which came up with an amazing profitability. And I think then NCSoft published Aeon, which I think Aeon 2 or so is also licensed by Gameforge. Do you see any new games coming out of Asia on the mobile and social side who make it in Europe? Or is it such a local kind of market that it doesn't really work?
A more interesting development is the distribution platforms that are coming from Asia. I think that's extremely relevant. At the end of the day, first, we're happy to see distribution platforms get diversified. You know, and at the end of the day, one of our strategies was to not rely too much on Google, Apple, and Facebook, and have our own platform. I think with as some of my colleagues here, and the fact that some of these platforms are coming in, it's very positive for us. Yeah. At the end of the day, pricing is an issue, but I think prices will come down eventually.
I was really surprised when I took a look at the most top installs charts.
Excuse me?
The top installs charts on mobile.
Yeah.
Last week, you see #1 Line,
yes,
which is a chat messenger coming out of Japan, similar to KakaoTalk. And most of the distribution traffic for mobile game
But
companies,
it was #1 where?
in Germany.
In Germany?
Yes, in Germany, and that just, I think,
So
within
what's
2 or 3
up
weeks.
should ask what's up.
Exactly.
And the fact is that these guys are going to have localized distribution of games per country. Yeah. So you're going to go to the Line game tab in Spain, and you're going to see some different social casino titles that when you're going to go to Brazil. This is an extremely powerful localization platform.
Yeah. So retention is everything, innovation is a lot. Let's close the panel with one last favor to the audience. And let's start with Khaled. What have you found out works best to keep the players playing?
Give them what they want.
That's free, sports and stuff? Or?
No, it's very easy. It's actually, like, a lot of the times people actually wonder why they're not successful. They don't listen to their players. Like,
so you give them the aha effect at the right moment and get the enjoyment up.
Gather the data, gather the KPIs. Like, don't try and figure out, like, so, like, one of the differences, like when you have somebody in the games industry, most people think that you need to have a product genius who comes up with all of the information, the creative aspect. That's true, that's really important. But the more you grow, the more you gather information, the more you gather feedback from the users.
So it's like an alive animal, which is developing and learning.
We add in content in the games every week. Every week, like in Farmerama, I have new things coming up every week, coming from the feedback of the users and the information we gather from them.
Is Farmerama bigger than Farmville now?
I don't think so, but soon probably.
It's all about content, so you have to constantly enhance content, bring more content in, but also make it or bring into the game competitive elements and peer pressure, more or less, that people or gamers come back and play and keep the retention high.
So you have to add content, and then you have to make this available to the players so they see it. Yeah. So you're an analytical guy, you're a content guy. What are you?
I'm a former marketeer.
I think he's more a content guy than I.
I'm a former marketeer turned CEO, and my answer will not surprise you. I think you have to get to know your players, especially your best ones, better than you know your own children. That's what you have to do. You need to exactly know how they feel about everything, and then engage them daily.
And by the way, I remember statistics when we worked on your deal that a small percentage of the players account for it's not even the 80-20 rule, it's
it's extreme Pareto.
Like the 98-2% rule. Yeah, so as long as you keep the 2% happy, and sometimes you bring people in from the 98% to the 2%, life is good, I believe.
Very good.
Jan, what are you doing to keep your players playing?
Well, it sounds a bit cliche, but it's one of our big slides, and it's also in the office. Wooga equals hearts and brains, and I think that kind of sums up both the content and the analytical. You have to have the heart, you have to understand the players, really get to know them, but then also have the brain, the analytics to measure everything you do. And then, and in the end, we're kind of creating fun. And often I feel we also have to keep that in mind, kind of, is what we're doing really conducive to someone just having fun. And then I think everything else will follow if they have fun.
Great.
Well, guys, at this time, thank you so much. I hope my questions weren't too boring and not too direct, intimidating. At least I prepared you, hopefully, for, at some point, an IPO roadshow. I really tried to put on my investor hat for this session. Congratulations, and keep up the good work. José Marín, please.
Thanks, Marco.